Hello everyone, Mohammed here for another tutorial with RTILA. So today we're going to do another exciting knowledge for you, for your automations. It's about the loops. And we're going to use the particular example that we shared a couple of days or weeks ago, the template about calculating and finding out the expenses on AppSumo. So we will learn about the loops and we will apply and demo that knowledge about the loops on this particular case of AppSumo Expenses. So let's start with this. And again, this is a beginner level and I'm running it on our version 6. What are we going to cover? So we have 5 points. A first one, a very quick one, is really to look at what do we mean by a loop? What is a loop, especially in the context of RTILA? And then we will see the basics of how to start a loop. There are different ways that you can use to start a loop. And then on the third point, we're going to see how to stop a loop. It's as important as starting a loop. You have to know how to stop a loop and when to stop it. And then on the fourth point, we will try to show with you, we will try to share with you the thought process. How do you think before you do a loop? Because it's really, I would say 80%, 90% of the success of a loop, it comes from here first. And then the software just automate what you have in your mind. So that's very important, point 4. And finally, a quick takeaway with the point 5 is proposing a small document, which is like a canvas that can help you to collect data about your loop so that you can execute your loop and automations faster. I find it useful for myself and we can cover it at the very end. So let's jump into the first point. So like I said, the first point is really a quick definition. And so what is a loop? A loop is essentially a function that allows you to repeat a certain set of automation. So let's say you put 3, 4, 5 actions, and then the loop will allow you to run those 4 or 5 actions again and again and again until you specify the condition that where the loop is stopping. So it's really like a repeat mode that goes through a list or through different types of links or number of occurrences to run this automation for you. What is the benefit? The benefit is really huge because looping or using loops is really how you can scale an automation. That's how you can go through dozens of links, hundreds of pages, even actually hundreds of thousands of pages can be scrapped or acted upon using loops. And let's just cover some example of loops so that it can crystallize in our mind. So when you loop through the links of a section, for example, a menu, a sitemap, that's a loop. You go through every link and you repeat a certain action. When you loop through the products of a page, that's also a loop. When you loop through a list of URLs on an Excel file, Google Sheet or CSV file, and to each URL you want to apply something, that's a loop. When you go at the bottom of some websites and you have pagination and you go through each pagination, that's also a loop. And finally, if you do a search on Google or any other website and you get a certain number of results, that's also a case for a loop to start. So basically what you can look at here in the small graph is that an automation, here you have the actions inside, action 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. And then they will be applied to every element that you target. So basically a loop happens in RTILA every time there is more than one element of something. So if you click on a link and there is more than one of it, it will create a loop automatically. So this is like an automatic thing in RTILA and I will show you how you recognize that. Let's go to the next point. So how do you start a loop? There are more than 3 ways, but today we're going to use the 3 most common ways of starting a loop in RTILA. So the first one is you can start a loop from a list of URLs inside our list variables. I will show you what it does, what it does and what it is. You can also input the URLs in the settings of a project, and you can copy paste them or load them from a file. And finally, like I said before, when an element has more than one occurrence, then you can start an auto loop. So these are the 3 main ways, and let's look at the first one. So the first one is when you have a list of URLs that you use inside our list variable in the automation panel. So here on the right, you can see the automation panel, and I have here a command that is called the list command inside the variable group. So how it works, it's very simple. You set up this list, you give it a name here, and you have to be very careful on how you name it, because you will need later on this keyword to call it in other places. And then you basically just copy and paste all your URLs here, and you make sure that there is one URL per line, and there is no space in the front, no space in the back. And that's the first way of creating a list. And then once you have this list here with all your pages in that you want to crawl, then how do you use this list to load the pages? Because you want to go through these pages. So then you have to create another command within this list that is called the go to URL. So it will navigate to the page. And here what happens is that you see here, by using this syntax, which is open bracket, the name of my list, and then close bracket, then what it does is that when you put that in the URL field here for go to URL, it's going to go and pull from the list variable and pull, and every cycle it will pull the next URL. So you don't have to think about this. Once the automation starts, it will finish one URL, do the stuff, come back, pull the next URL, and so on. So that's how it works. And make sure, like I said, that you rename the list. If you gave it another name, make sure that you use whatever name you have. You may have 1 or 2 or 3 different lists in your automation, so you may call them otherwise. But this is the basic principle of how you use the list variable. And I can show you quickly how does this look like. Okay, I'm on my automation panel, and I'm going to show you how this list variable works. You can see here on this side of the panel, if I click, it will open up the list configuration. And this is what I was telling you about. I already pasted all my URLs here, and I pasted 100 of them. So when you have, let's say, 100 or few hundred, maybe you can use this manual entry, but otherwise you can import a file from here, and then it will automatically load them one by one. And also, you have some other options here that we're going to cover later on. But this is basically the block that is called list variable, and where you find it is when you click on new command, and then you go into the variable list, and it's this one, the list with multiple values. This is the command that you need to use to create this variable list. Now there is a second way that you can use to create a loop, which is entering the list of URLs in the project settings. So it's very simple. You go into the project panel, and you have a screenshot right here. And then what you have to do is you have to click here in this configure gear icon. Once you click there, it's going to bring you to this section here at the bottom. And then in this tab, the URLs tab, it's going to open up for you the field where you can paste the URLs right here. So you can see it over there. And if you have more URLs, like more than 100, you can also use import from file. Or if you had the first automation that went through some process to gather a number of URLs, then you can feed the results of the first automation into this one as an input, and it will also work. You can also import or read an XML sitemap from a website and then go through all those pages. So this is the second way that can be used. And what is important to note is that when you use this method, then you do not need to have a go-to URL action. You do not need to have a list variable, because all the URLs are coming from the settings. Therefore, inside your project, inside the automation panel, you just go straight into dealing with the next step, which is maybe the second loop about the invoices themselves, and then catching the data. But you can get away with the variable list and the go-to URL command. And very important is that when you enter the URLs here, or when you choose a file, you really have to click on this save button here. So saving all settings is not enough. You have to do it also with this button here, and we will make it better later on, but you really have to remember to click this save here. Okay, so let's do a quick live demo so I can show you where you find all these things. Okay, so I'm back into my project panel, and for example, for this particular case, the AppSumo Expenses project, I can click on this gear icon to configure. And now it loaded the configuration panel, and then I can click on URLs, and then I can just paste here all my URLs as I showed in the screenshot. It's that easy. The other options are available from here. If you want to choose a file, import from another project, you just load the project that you want to get the URLs from, and then it will feed those URLs, or you can specify a sitemap, and then it will go through everything. Okay, let's now look at the third way of creating loops, and this one is basically auto-created by the system. And how it works is pretty simple, even if it's not very obvious at the beginning, is that every time you have an element or a selector that has more than one occurrence, it will actually be considered as a loop by RTILA. So you don't have to tell RTILA this is a loop. It will know that if it has to click twice on the same type of element, then that is a loop. It will go through the first one, the second one, and if there is more, it will go through all of them. So you can see here that when I specified this CSS locator right here, RTILA find out that this locator is happening 12 times, and that's exactly what I want. On each page of my history of purchases, there are 12 invoices, up to 12 invoices. So whatever it finds that is contained in this CSS locator, it will use it as an element of the loop. And you can see that once you have a selector, then every link that is going to be clicked for the loop is highlighted by RTILA. So that gives you like a double check. You can see that, that's the right links that are clicked. I don't want it to click on the product itself that was bought, but only on the invoice IDs. So it seems to be doing the job. The selector is good, and therefore here the number 12 is the 12 cycles that this loop will go through. And for this case as well, let's look at it through a live demo. Okay, I'm on the page of interest, which is my history, the first page of my purchase history. And I'm going to show you how that element is going to be creating the loop of 12 occurrences. So I will explain as we go all the sections here, but right now where we are is that we are already inside the list, and from the list we got the URL, the first URL, which is already here. And then I will explain the variables later, but essentially once we are on this page here, I want to click on every link that you see here, the 12 of them. So I can use a click element, and then you see this is our selector, and as soon as we are here, it has highlighted the 12 invoice links that will be clicked through this loop. And then you can see the count here. It counted the 12. So indeed, within this block here, this 1, 2, 3, 4 automation steps will be repeated 12 times because we found 12 of these elements. So that's the idea of an element that occurs more than once and that creates an automatic loop in RTILA. All right, so we have seen how to launch a loop, how to start a loop, the 3 ways. Now let's look at 3 ways of stopping a loop. So stopping a loop is as important as starting a loop. It's like when you drive a car and you only know how to accelerate, but you don't know how to brake. It can be a problem. Or if you know how to start the engine, but you don't know how to stop the engine. So it's as important, if not more important, to stop a loop properly at the right time than actually being able to start it. Because if you don't stop it at the right time, it may run forever and create some surprises or some damage, or even make your computer go really hot and so on. Because loops, if they're not stopped, they could continue forever and eat up resources. So let's look at quickly at how we can stop a loop. So you have the first one, which when you are inside the variable list, the list as a type of variable, the first one is an automatic stop, meaning that unless you specify otherwise, it will go through all the URLs that you have pasted there. And when there is no more URLs to go through, then it will stop automatically. It will stop looping that section. This is pretty simple. You have another way that even if you have, let's say, 100 URLs like I did in this example, you can say that today or according to a certain condition, I'm only going to scrap from result 1, from line 1 to line 30. So you put a programmatic stop. You tell how many cycles you want and where you want it to stop. So this is very straightforward. Another example which is less straightforward but very powerful, and I will explain why, is that you can put a condition that can stop the loop. So that's a conditional stop. So for example, of course I don't have 100 pages of invoices on AppSumo, but I can allow myself to put a ridiculously big number of pages because I have a condition that if it's met, the loop will stop. So it doesn't matter if you have 12 pages in your account, if I have 20, it will always work as long as there is at least one and less than 100, but I could put even 200 URLs. So it's not going to eat up resources because what I have done here, and we can cover the conditional logic in another video because conditions are also, they deserve their own section. But just so that you know that the condition that I have put is that when a page doesn't exist, when a invoice page doesn't exist on AppSumo, suddenly will appear this 404 error message. Yeah. So I put a condition that the loop shall go on until this thing appear. Because if this thing appear, that means I have passed my last page of transactions. There is no more page. Therefore, I kill the automation. I kill the loop, and that's what it does here. And I will show you in the demo. But essentially, I created two variables that I can compare. So I created the first variable that is like my basis variable where I give it the value 404. And then when I reach this page, every time before the loop starts on each cycle, I check again the h1 tag. And if the h1 tag is different than 404, then automation proceeds. But if the h1 tag is now equal to 404, it stops the automation. That's the idea of this condition. And I can show you quickly how it looks like on the page, even though we will cover it on a separate video. Okay, I'm back to the automation panel to show you how the conditional logic has been used. So before starting, where do you find this conditional logic is when you go to new command, and then you have here condition. And then for now we have one option, which is about comparing variables. So you just add it and it's here. So now what you see here with the green and the red sections is all belongs to the conditional comparison. And you can see here the requirements. So what it tells you is that it has to compare two variables. And then depending on what happens between these two variables, if they one include another, if they match, if they start with something, you know, or if it doesn't contain some specific value, then this and this will happen. So how it works is that if the comparison of the variables is positive, then it will load whatever is in the green. If the comparison result is negative, it will load whatever is in the red. So if you say that if the 404 message appears, then that's negative for me, then I will stop the automation. But the way that I've done it is that if the H1 is not 404, then that's my positive result. Therefore, then please continue, and then it will extract the results, open the page, extract the result, close the page, and then go to the next URL. So that's how roughly it works. You have to do it once, twice, 3 times. Sometimes it's counterintuitive, but once you get it, you can really do a lot of things with conditional logic. So if you want to go through the template that we are sharing with you guys and also this presentation, you can see how I do it is that I declare a static value, which is 404 for this variable. And then when I come to this page here, I study the h1 tag, which is this tag. And I basically say that if the h1 value, which is here, you can see that I'm actually catching, I'll show you, the h1 value right here. I am checking this field, which is the h1 tag, yeah? And I'm catching the value of it and saving it in h1 value as a variable. And then when I reach the comparison, I want to say that whatever you grabbed here, whatever value is there, I don't want it to contain my variable h104, because if it contains 404 as a result, then I want to kill the automation. But if it doesn't contain 404 as a content, then proceed with the green automation. So I hope it's enough for now, just to give you an idea. And again, we will cover this more in depth in a separate videos about variables. Okay, now we know what is a loop, how we can start it, the different ways to start it, different ways to stop it. And if it's not enough, please watch again multiple times until you get it, and also go and manipulate, experiment, make loops and break them until really you start to understand that there are loops and there are loops within loops, and we will talk about it a bit more. But right now, let's look at what's the best way to think before starting a loop. And I want to share with you a couple of habits that one develop once we do a couple of loops and automations. Yeah, there's a number of questions that you can ask yourself. So first, before the automation program reaches the data that you want to catch, what are the different steps that you have to go through? Do you have to log in? Do you have to click somewhere, load a certain page before you even start the loop? You need to cover all those steps. And then within those steps, maybe one or none of them, or more than one, is actually a loop in itself. So if, for example, I go through the pagination of a website, that step is itself a loop. So also, in this example, we're not using pagination, and I will explain to you why I'm not using pagination as a beginner. So I'm not a developer, so I chose not to use pagination. It was giving me challenges, and I find an easier and more efficient way because I noticed that the URLs in AppSumo, they have an ID number which is made of digits, and they increment one by one. So why give myself headache looking for those selectors when I just can create a series and just add one to the last number from page 1 to page 100. And also another question is that inside the loop, what is the next loop? So if I have 100 pages of invoices that we are going to run through, each actually page has multiple invoices. Therefore, inside each page, there is another loop. I need to click on each invoice. And in our case, there is 12 invoices per page. So that's the loop inside the loop, the second loop. And also as a habit, like, don't start to automate immediately. You have to really go into that website and load a number of results so that you can see all the scenarios that are possible. Because in my case, and actually in AppSumo case, you will notice it, there are some invoices that have refunds, those that do not have refunds. You have some orders that have 0 as an amount because it was a freebie. So you have different scenarios that if you don't know about them, you're going to choose the wrong selector. And that's what I mean by the amount. The selector for the amount, if you don't choose it carefully, you can end up capturing a negative amount because you captured the amount that is about the refund. And what you really want, I will show you later on in the demo, is that you want the amount paid at the end if you want to know how much you spent. So those are basic questions. In another scenario, on another website, it will be different questions, but you get the point on how you walk through them. And then when you look at pagination, or the first thing you do is that before you even try to paginate, try to find a pattern. Like, what is the pattern that is happening in my loops? Is it incremental or not? Is it random IDs, or is it some specific thing that appears that is stable that I could base my automation upon? So these are questions to ask yourself. And finally, once you have a first level of loops and loops within the loops that you can control, then before even launching the automation, especially if it's an automation that you want to launch every week or every month or so, it's worth optimizing it. So it's worth a little bit more thoughts and like, can I remove one step? Is there a shortcut I can do without losing data? And then also make sure that the loop really stops when you want it to stop. So either you put a number of stops, you put a timeout, or you put a condition that will happen to stop the loop. So these are about the way of thinking about loops. And what we can do is we can look at what I said. I can share with you in live how I find out all the answers to all these questions. Okay, so I'm on my purchase history page, and I want to really go through a couple of pages to identify what are the data that are stable, what are the scenarios, and how it works. So when you come here already, you notice that there are invoices that have one product, and there are invoices that have multiple products. So I have to be careful not to be disturbed that my selectors are not catching the subproducts of a given order. And you can see that there is a status, there is a date, there is the amount. And if I go through, all of these are paid, paid, paid. So I just browse through just to actually remind myself of what kind of scenarios are happening. These are all paid, these are all paid, these are all paid, different types of amount. This has a lot of items in it. So there may be 12, there may be maybe less than 12, but I have not encountered another status. You see, this one has a refund. So that's interesting for me because I need to cater for this scenario. So let us look at this invoice in particular. So it's a partial refund. So therefore, when I'm selecting my locator, I have to be careful not to select this one because then I get a minus. And I should not select this total because this total is not representative of what I have paid. This one neither. It's a subtotal of the invoice that has multiple items. So what is the most stable amount locator on my pages is the one that is for total paid with such and such card that appears at the very bottom right. This is my locator. This is the locator that whatever happens, whether there is a refund or not, I will always get the right amount. So this is the first thing that we notice here that we need to cover, yeah? And then as I go, now I know that I have refunds and non-refunds. I don't know if I have some with freebies. Maybe we can find one that was completely free. Another refund. Okay, I don't remember when was the last time I got a freebie, but you got the point. You can try the different statuses, and as I'm going, if you notice here, the pagination is opening up more pages, and now I have the full stretch of my of the pages, yeah. And why I didn't use pagination as a loop is because when I started on page 1 here, I would need to click this next pagination item multiple times. As you can see here now, it shows page 12 and then click again. So I need to click every time on this arrow to get just one more page. And then what I was looking at is that, wait, maybe I don't need to do that because I noticed that there is a pattern here, you see? The pattern is that it is going +1. So if I start with page 1, which was the first page I was on, and I just add 2, and then 3, and then 4, and so on, I can go through all my purchases. And therefore, it doesn't matter if I have 20 pages or 10 pages, because as long as I can cover the maximum number of pages that is usually possible to have on AppSumo. So in my case here, I have 19, almost 20 pages of invoices, which is already a lot. Let's say someone ordered for $1 million on AppSumo, maybe you will have 100 pages, yeah, or 80 or 90 pages. So since I know that what is like the most exaggerated number of pages that I could allow myself to have here, then I used Excel. I'm going to show you how I used Excel. So I just start with page 1. We can also use RTILA. We will show you on another video to generate a series of URLs. But if you have Excel or even Google Sheet, you can do the same and save yourself some hassle. So let's load a new blank sheet. And if you just put the first URL in the first cell and you drag it down, it's going to create as many incremental URLs as you want. And let's say I wanted 100. Boom. Now I got all of them. And now I just right click all this, copy, and throw them into RTILA. So that's what I did. No headache, very simple, very quick. And I know that I will not go over 100 pages. And anyway, my automation will not do the 100 pages. This is not a waste, because remember we put a condition, so I can afford to have 100 pages potentially, but the condition is going to happen on page 19. After page 19, page 20 is going to show the 404 error. So I can show you right here. So if I try to go to page 20, I don't know if page 20 exists. So page 20 doesn't exist. Page 19, it does exist. So page 19, the H1 is purchase history. But when it will reach the next iteration to page 20, then the 404 will appear as a H1 value, and then boom, I kill the automation. So this is a simple way that can save you a lot of time. Okay, I think hopefully you got the point on the different types of questions and how you study your website, how you go through different pages, different types of invoices and so on to sort out and map in your mind all the potential scenarios to better build your automation. So of course there's always more. This is a simplified approach just to put you on the rails. Yeah. So as a giveaway, this is something that at least to me is very useful, and it could be very useful to you as well, especially if you're not a developer, if you're not a tech guy. You could actually use this, we will share it with you, and just replace what I've done with your data. And basically you have 3 blocks to think of in most cases. So first, I need to understand that I have a first loop to go through. The first loop is the 100 pages that I want to go through, yeah? And for all those 100 pages inside this first loop, how do I start my loop? That's question number 1. So this is a variable list where I pasted all my URLs. That's how it starts. It's going to go through all the URLs one by one. How many cycles is my loop for me to double check and understand if I'm doing it right? In my case, it's 100 up to 100 pages is the number of cycles. What is the best locator? In this case, when you're using a list variable, you don't need a locator because you already fed it the URLs. And then when will my loop stop? So either you put a programmatic stop, say stop at line 30, or you can put, or it stops at the 100 pages if you do have 100 pages, or you can put a condition like I said, once the error 404 appears, stop. So now you covered the first loop. The first loop is safe. Now let's go for each cycle of the first loop, then opens up the second loop. The second loop group is going to run for every URL that is in here. Now my second loop, what is it? This is the invoice links. There's the invoice ID with a link on top of it. And what kind of automation action I need to kick off this loop? It's a click. It's a click automation. So that's how I start the loop. It will click every invoice, and I already identify the best CSS locator. And this CSS locator .id space A brings up 12 results, therefore creates this second loop of 12 things to click through. When does it stop? It stops automatically because once it's finished the 12s, there is no 13 element, it will finish. Now inside the second loop, there is a number of action I have to do so again, just to map it again, inside the 100 loops of the first loop, for every URL of the first 100 cycles of the first loop, we're going to run a second loop which has itself 12 cycles, and for each one cycle of the 12th cycle of the second loop within the first loop, we're going to catch the data. So that means that potentially you're going to do 100 times 12 multiplied by this. That's the number of all results that you will get. And that's why it's important to put the extract dataset command once you are inside the final loop and you are in the page where the data is. And here again, give yourself a good habit that before you even start automating with RTILA, you've already gone through the training that we did before about the locators, and you already know what data you want, how you name each data, and how and what is the CSS locator. So you prepare them on a document, a PowerPoint, an Excel, even a Notepad document. It doesn't matter. If you do this, you're going to save a lot of time in creating your automations. And you can see that I want to catch four elements. The first one I called URL and invoice ID so that I can go back to that URL and double check. And this is the locator that gives the right result. The second one, I want to capture the date of the invoice, and this is its corresponding CSS selector. And then second is that I want the amount, and the amount that always works even if there is a refund. And for that amount, this is the selector, this is the locator. Finally, I want to also capture the status. I want to know if it was a refund, partial refund, full refund, or not. And this is again the selector. Yeah. And if you have not yet watched the video about the locators and the selectors, it's here. You have the link here. Watch it, and then it will give you more details on how I found them. But it's not very complicated. So the good thing about this automation canvas is that you can actually do a blind automation. So with this information, I don't need to look at AppSumo website. I have everything I need to go on RTILA, and I don't even need to look at AppSumo. I'm going to create my first loop. I know which URLs I'm going to put. I know when to start it, when to stop it. Inside that loop, I'm going to create a second loop because I know which ID, which locator I'm going to click. And then I will create that second loop, even if I don't see it visually in front of me. And I know that for each invoice link that is going to be clicked, I have to create these data properties on the inspection panel, and I already know the selector, therefore I create them, and then the last thing I have to do is put my extract data at the end of this loop to capture this data. And also the good advantage of an automation canvas is that you can give it to a developer, you can give it to a tech person, and when they look at it, they say, okay, I got it. I can get this running for you. And even if you have the wrong selector or you did a small mistake here and there, they will get the overall objective, especially if you can do a loom or a video screen capture of your screen, and then you do this canvas. It could be useful. So it's here just as a template for you guys to use it if you wish so. Otherwise, I hope we have shared enough for you to be able to create loops and also loops inside loops. We'll gladly take questions, comments in the video. Subscribe as well so that you can see the next tutorials. And we thank you again for your attention. Mohammed here from RTILA.